what helps you break away from that big law firm with stability and consistency to become an entrepreneur?
Put aside your dignity, get through the day, figure out what's going on, and keep persevering. And I think that a lot of the stories hold that kind of lesson.
What advice do you have for someone who's now, as they listen to this episode, Alia was able to do that, I want to do that?
Hey, just go with the flow. Life is going to be rough and weird sometimes, but it's going to give you some amazing experiences to take with you going forward.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the IWillAim Podcast. Our topic for today is creative pursuit. Learn how to break out of the mold of your job and apply your creative interests. And my special guest is Alia Luria, an award-winning author of the London Book Festival on her book Gerio Shimash. Welcome, Alia.
Thank you for having me, Will.
You're welcome. How about let's start with a quick introduction?
Sure. My name is Alia Luria, obviously, and I have been a practicing attorney for 15 years now. I started out my career before that as a software engineer, but decided I really wanted to be involved more on the business side rather than the technical side. And so I went, like all naive people, to law school and became a lawyer. And I practiced in big law, which is basically large law firms, for a number of years before transitioning to a solo practice as well as boutique practice with another attorney. And during that long career, I've also written some books. I started with fiction, which I wrote in 2015 while I was still in big law. And then my most recent book, Gerio Shimash, which actually releases August 12th of this year. So I love my creative pursuits, and I have a lot of them, and hopefully we'll get to chat about more of them during this talk.
Thank you for sharing your background. I really love the fact that you start with a career at a big law firm and then came out and create your own practice. Let's start with you started with a big law firm. What were your biggest lesson or challenges in the environment that shaped your path forward?
I think one of the biggest expectations of working in a large law firm, and often this can be the case in any large organization, is the idea that you will subsume your identity to the identity of the corporation. Whether, you kind of have to toe the party line, you have to drink the Kool-Aid, you have to make it not just your passion, but your life. And that was something that I felt was happening to me as I continued to practice in big law. I was expected to spend all of my time working on the billable hour and making sure that my firm was taken care of. And even when I would meet those expectations or exceed them and get bonuses, I would still be kind of not criticized, but certainly people would wonder why I bothered to do anything else. Why was I writing books? Why was I doing this thing and that thing? And so those were some of the challenges, is finding that boundary where you can still be yourself and be who you are as a person while giving what you want to give to your job.
I think I definitely relate to the fact that the company expect you to, in many ways, dedicate your life to your profession. And I did felt that for many, many years. And I do truly agree with you on that one. And that's a big challenge for many people, especially our listener, especially people who are starting their career. They're thinking that that's what they're going to do, and they need to put all their time and effort 24/7 to their career. The question for you is what helps you break away from that big law firm with stability and consistency to become an entrepreneur? What's the
The turning point, I think, for me was understanding that it didn't matter how much I gave. It was never going to be what they needed or what they wanted. And I say that not as a criticism of the law firm, but because I think part of it isn't just that the organization, is that it's that the people who are in that organization have done that. They've given everything. And so they
Yes.
feel like the only way to succeed is to give everything. And so there, in the ways, there's a cycle there. And I just didn't want to participate in that cycle anymore. And I think it was more important to me to have a balanced life and to feel like I was creating and producing individually as a person as well as for my clients. And I felt like my clients weren't getting the best of me. They were getting all of me, but they weren't getting the best of me. And that's because I wasn't a whole person for them. And so in some respects, it's a service to my clients to be there for myself, because that lets me be creative, not just for me, but for them too.
I like the concept of bringing your whole self, right? And being able to deliver that service to your client as a whole person. And I think I love that you actually highlight that, because that's one thing that I want our audience to take away from today's episode. I want to congratulate on your book. It won the award for nonfiction from the London Book Festival. The question I have for you is, what inspired you to write the book, and what does the title means, and what are the key message you have?
Sure. So the book focuses on actually a semester of law school that I spent living in Tokyo. And that was
Hmm.
actually a dream of mine since I attended law school, was that I knew that this program existed and it would allow you to do an entire spring semester in Tokyo. And so I actually knew I was attending that program before I knew which law school I was going to. And so the book, I thought about writing it for a long time after I went. I was there in 2008, and obviously it's now 2025. And I thought about writing the book for a long time, but I really wanted to write it in a way that gave people an impression of the lasting effect it had on me, not in my immediate adventure. So what, 15 years on is still important to me. What do I still reflect on from that time? And how did that book make me who I am today, or that experience make me who I am today, rather than just, here's some fun adventures that I learned while I was living in Japan. It's more like, here's the things that stuck with me and how I changed as a person, and like what aspects of that culture still sit with me later on. The title Geriyoshimasu has the unfortunate meaning of I do diarrhea. It was actually the first thing I ever said to a Japanese person in Japan when I was living there, because I entered the country recovering from a kidney infection. And so I had a lot of issues with my stomach right when I first got there. And I had to go to a pharmacy and explain what was happening and get some help. And so, in some respects, it kind of sets the tone for this outsiderness, this idea of showing up completely unprepared to live in a new culture. And I think that's why the title sticks with me. Luckily, when you say it, you don't think that too much, unless you're a Japanese person, in which case you probably laugh every time you hear it. But the idea is that this is a situation where you really just have to adapt. You just have to put aside your dignity, get through the day, figure out what's going on, and keep persevering. And I think that a lot of the stories hold that kind of lesson. Hey, just go with the flow. Life is going to be rough and weird sometimes, but it's going to give you some amazing experiences to take with you going forward.
Well, thank you for sharing the background of the book. I'm really looking forward to read the book, even though now I know the meaning of the title, which is kind of funny. I like the Japanese version of the name, but thank you for sharing. Congratulations again. Now, my
Thank you so
question for
much.
you is, being that you traveled and lived in Japan for that one semester, how has that experience affect the way or impact the way you interact with your client and enhance your experience?
It definitely does. I think once you've had a chance to live in another culture and experience the fact that life goes on all over the world when you're not in a non-American way, in a non-way that you're used to it going on. I mean, it's the same even when you go from state to state in the US. Life in Florida is different than life in New York, is different than
Yeah.
life in Seattle. But the extreme of it really gives you the thought, okay, I've just heard something and it might be offensive to me, but maybe I want to stop and think about it from the context of the person who's saying it. You know what I mean? Or maybe I want to stop and give somebody a benefit of a doubt that, their interpretation or view of something is different than mine, and they might have a reason for that. And it also gives you the ability to stop and think just quickly right before you say something. How is this going to be interpreted by someone else? Is this going to be taken out of context? Or is my meaning clear in the way that I'm saying it? Because you really do, I think, have to look at not just what people say, but how they say it, their faces, their signals. And you also have to be really introspective, I think, casting off your assumptions, especially even in client work, because again, clients come from a different place. They might be from a different culture. They might be from just a different part of the States, or they might just have a different upbringing than you, a different religious background, a different, touch points. And so being able to communicate with people openly and authentically and also without judgment is really, really important when you're trying to land clients, when you're trying to make them happy, and when you're trying to give them your best work. So,
I like the fact that you mentioned about assumption, right? How not to assume about something. And more importantly, as you talk about adapting and adjusting, you also mentioned about putting yourself in one's shoes and not jumping into conclusion. And those are very powerful message. As you pivot from big law firm to create your own boutique law firm and into writing books, right? I think how does those parallels between an author and your job as a lawyer, how does those interplay? Because I love the fact that you pivot and you apply your creative aspect to your work. So can you kind of elaborate more about that experience?
Sure. So I think it started for me because I was getting into a rut of always writing the same way, always communicating the same way. And I think that that's something that a lot of lawyers particularly get into because we do nothing but write for our jobs,
Mm.
but we write in a very specific voice. We write a very specific content topic and very rigidly with a very structured way of communicating. And so for me, I felt like I was losing kind of that passion to communicate more ad hoc, more colloquially, but also just more authentically. And so I wanted to bring that back. And that's kind of what I went on a journey myself of just reading more. I started by reading more. And then I started like writing blog posts about criticizing or analyzing what I'd read. And then when I had my idea for my novel, I was like, wow, this has to be written. And so I think for me, it was filling the need of making sure that I stay broad in how I communicate. And I think that that's the kind of creativity that can resonate with a lot of people, right? Because a lot of us in our jobs are pigeonholed into a specific way of thinking, acting, and communicating. And having these other outlets, whether it's writing, poetry, painting, craft, those just give you alternate ways to communicate ideas as well as alternate voices to use to communicate them. And I think that's the part for me that was the big transition. And when I started to be able to communicate more broadly, I would start to notice things that people said in a different way and allow myself to think about those topics and those things that they said from their perspective better. It made me better, particularly at communicating with my business clients, because I was looking at them as people with the business that they cared about, that they were emotionally invested in, not just as a bottom line or a risk assessment, but as this is your baby, your passion, your love, and I want to help you protect it and defend it. But I want to treat it, though I want you to feel like you trust me to do that because I understand and I am like you and I have passions that I care about and that I nurture. So in that respect, I think it made me a much better lawyer. And I feel like this can be translated to a lot of different areas for people because you do you just get a better sense of people's needs when you understand your own needs.
I like the concept of, a lot of our work made us narrow and specialize in something. And I love the way even your hand gesture like broaden, right?
Hmm.
That broaden that perspective, and you become a better at your job because, like you said,
Hmm.
you understand your client better. You're able to interact with them better because you have a broader perspective and understanding. And thank you for highlighting that. Let's take it one step further. What advice do you have for someone who's now, as they listen to this episode, Aliyah was able to do that? I want to do that. What's your advice to them as maybe their first step other than exploring and thinking about it?
Right. So what I did was I actually took like a class on novel writing. And I knew how to
Hmm.
write a novel. I mean, I'd started already writing them over the time, but what it gave me was accountability. So I set in a way to bring some accountability to that first step. And that for me was taking a class called the 90-day novel. But there are so many ways of approaching that. You can do certificate programs, you can do an MFA, you can, if for writing specifically, you take a ceramics class,
Yeah.
anything that kind of creates a little bit of accountability for you and lets you say, okay, this is my idea of how to broaden myself. I don't want to just think about it. I want it to give myself a goal and some accountability around it. And for me, that was writing a novel. That was the first step in breaking away. Now, it didn't happen overnight. I mean, it took a number of years, but it gave me confidence that this, like writing that novel, putting that novel out there, seeing the critical response it got, gave me the confidence to say, okay, this is something I'm going to pursue, and it's something that of value, and it's made me a happier person. And being a happier person and a more confident person makes it easier to break out of the kind of rut or the mold that you might be feeling stuck in. If it's a, big job or a big salary paycheck, because you need to have a couple feelings, right? You need to have that sense of
Mm.
financial security, but you also need to have the confidence that this is something that is worthwhile, and it's not just a dream, but it's something actionable and real. And I think that taking that first step of having a class or having a goal, like even it's self-done, and giving yourself a deadline of what you're going to accomplish by when, will give you that confidence you need to move forward with those kinds of projects.
Thank you for sharing that. Aside from making a decision, taking a class is taking action. That's the
Mm-hmm.
first step. As you mentioned, as you start taking the class, you develop that accountability and you create that experience. And as a result, like you said, you would know whether you like to do it or not. Is it something I want to stick to it or not? And whether you know how long it would be. But at least I love the concept of not only did you decide, take action, be part of something, doing it, and experiencing. Let's move the talk a little bit forward. Now that you have done corporate and your boutique business, you wrote books. When you look back in your journey, what's the moment that you're most proud of, and what's the next step for you?
Right. So I will say it didn't work out. Like, so after I left Big Law, I started with a boutique firm that a friend of mine from law school had founded, and it was great. And I loved working at it. But I took the chance of leaving that firm and starting my own company, which was a compliance software company. And it didn't work out. It eventually COVID killed it. But I'm still so proud that I took that leap and I founded a business. We created a minimum viable product. We attended a technology accelerator. We got funding from, Barclays Bank, and we built a product and we were able to sell it to people. And I feel like even though ultimately that business didn't succeed, I learned so much about myself from it. I learned so much about being a founder and an entrepreneur. And I also built a product that, yes, I didn't have financial success, but I felt like it added to me as a person. And so I'm very, very proud of that. People might think, oh, that's a failure, but for me, I'm very proud of it. And what's next for me is continuing to write more books. I have another one coming out in 2027
Oh, wow.
called Preposterous Bloodshed from the same publisher that does Gedi Oshimas. I also have my second novel, hopefully coming out. It's almost done. It needs to go into editing next year. That's Ocularum. I have a couple of other books that I've been thinking through. I'd love to write one about doing tabletop privacy exercises with a role playing game bent to it. And then I'm also looking to expand my privacy practice as a lawyer and, expand my client base. We work with some great clients, but I'd love to build that as well and do more with, my passion in privacy, which is tabletop exercises and things like that. So I got a lot on my plate, but I'm extremely excited about all of
Looks like future is so exciting. I love the fact that you have so many books lined up already. And when you talk about your career, I would actually characterize your career as a success. Not many
it.
people is confident and courageous enough to work outside a comfort zone and start a company. Not to mention that you lead a team to develop a software that people use. And that to me is a success. It's a success based on experience, and not many people could say that. Although you use the word failure, it's not really a failure. If people view that as a failure, they're the one that's failing because they never even step outside your comfort zone. And your story really, I hope, really resonate with a lot of people because throughout my career, I've gone through the same thing where I thought just focus on my career and forget about your creative pursuit. That's really the key message that I want people to learn from this episode. We talk about your book, we talk about your career from big law to boutique to your own personal practice. We talk about the books that you wrote. If there are three takeaways for today's episode, what would those three takeaways be? What do you want people to remember?
Remember that you are a whole person, that you're more than your job. You are also your interests and you are your passions, and those things don't have to detract from your job. You can find ways to make them part of your life and part of your job. The second thing I would say is don't feel like what you're going through right now is what you'll always be going through, because we are in a constant state of transition, and
Mm.
those incremental steps we take can take us in the direction we want to go, or they can take us away from the direction we want to go. And you can't control the bus you're driving, but you can maybe jiggle the steering wheel
Yeah.
here and there. And I think take that in mind. It doesn't have to be you quit your job and move to Mexico. It can be you take a class or you generate an idea and you start there and then you just go towards your dream. And then the third thing, I think you kind of helped me point that out, is that sometimes the risk itself and the experience itself is what matters, not the result. So even if you have a business that fails, or you have a book that flops, or you have a project at work that just doesn't hit the expectations of the business, your life is not over.
Mm.
You
True.
learn, you grow, and you try again and do something else with your life, and you take that experience and you use it towards what you do next. So those are my three takeaways.
I love all three takeaway. I'm sure it's going to resonate with my audience. The question I have for you is, if someone from my audience wants to reach out to you, wants to connect with you, wants to learn more about what you do, maybe invite you to speak at their event, how would they do that?
So one good way would be to contact me right on LinkedIn. My name is Alia Luria, Alia Luria, and I'm the only one on LinkedIn, so it should be easy for you to find me. And you can also reach out to me at my author website, which is alialuria.com. Same word, Alialura. And I'm on socials all under the same name because it's a pretty unique name. So if you want to get a hold of me, you will easily be able to. And I actually would love to connect with people, even if you just have questions or want to tell me about your similar experience, or, anything about what I did. I love to connect with people and help them out as much as I can. So thank you.
Thank you, Alia, for being a guest on my podcast. I'm really honored to have you, and congratulations on your book again. I'm looking forward to read it. It's an award-winning book, so you're an award-winning author. So congratulations. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you.